When the credits start rolling, but the movie keeps haunting you.
Before, after.
Then it's time to tune in to Dismembering Horror. We'll talk about what worked and also what didn't. We'll dissect every aspect. Maybe some that we shouldn't.
They turned out to be completely unreliable assholes.
Take it away, boys.
Hello, Tim.
Hello, Ryan.
Hey, just you and me again after a string of guests here.
Thank goodness.
And hello. And hello to everyone listening. Thanks for being here. As our wonderful setup introduction lady said for us, this is Dismembering Horror. And specifically, this is episode 188 of Dismembering Horror, where we will be bringing our patented dismemberment to Pearl. Directed by Ty West, written by Ty West and Mia Goth from this fine year of 2022. Anything else to say to get us in the mood here, Tim? Get us set? Anything that you want to address?
I mean, just that this is a prequel to X, which we did a number of episodes ago.
Yes. And we hope you've seen it, but if not, all the same. But we will be speaking, well, Tim and I have seen it, so we will be speaking as if we've seen it to each other, and hope you're included in that. But we'll get the rundown all the same. Happy to have you here all the same. All right, well, to really get into it, we like to watch the trailer. So here we go. As I just said, from 2022, Pearl.
Star the world has ever known, so that I'll make it far, far away from this place.
Well, caring for your family during these times is admirable, but you only get one take at this life.
If only they would just die.
Pardon?
Nothing. I want to be special, dancing up on the screen like the pretty girls in the pictures.
I will not let you leave this farm again.
All right, Pearl, everyone's favorite small town sweetie here.
Yeah.
All right, for our rating, Tim, would we tell ourselves to avoid, stream, rent, or go ahead and buy Pearl? Who do you want to go?
You know, I like this movie, but I don't I don't love it, I guess. So because of that, I'm gonna be a rent, but a very strong rent. I think it's worth spending money on for sure.
Do you want to guess what I thought?
I think you want to buy it because you love everything.
Wait, what do you mean? Because I love everything. That's not fair.
You love Ty West. You love Mia Goth. I mean, everything about this film.
Okay.
And them.
That I agree with. So I think that was pretty picky. But yeah, I do. You do know me to know I love everything about this film, and I want to buy it, and I want to buy the box set that comes with this, and then the sequel Maxine that's coming out, and X. Just I want it all now.
Yeah,
I loved it. And yeah, you know what? I'll just start going on and on. If I give my review and summary, it won't be such a summary. So we'll save that for what worked. But to get all on the same page here, we got to summarize it. So what was this film, Tim? What happened in it?
It takes place in the same place as X, the farm. And I don't remember. Did we determine where this is? Is it a fictional, just countryside? Oh, it's Texas. Okay, so we're in Texas. That's right. And I remember X barely.
Yeah.
So we're in Texas in the right around World War I. I guess World War I is coming to an end. It's 1918. There's a Spanish influenza pandemic happening, and we're on the same farm as X with the same woman who lived on that farm, Pearl, as a young woman. And she is the daughter of German immigrants, and they're not very well liked at this time in the U.S. And so they're playing a little sort of game of isolationism for many reasons, but least of which is that, you know, they're disliked by their neighbors and such. And the mom, who's fairly, austere, is caring for, as well as running the farm, her husband, who, did I catch this right, that is syphilis is what he's suffering from, or did I imagine that?
From something going around, whether it was this or something else.
Okay, I thought that I thought I heard the mom say syphilis at one point, but anyway, whatever it is, he's what's the term for it?
An invalid.
An invalid. And so they have to take care of him. He's in a wheelchair. He can't do anything. He can't talk. He can't feed himself. He can't bathe, all those things. So he's a lot of work for Pearl, and the mom, I think reasonably so. The mom wants Pearl to, live up to her responsibilities and not be a teenager who wants to run away and be in the movies, which she does want. She also has a husband who was in the war, and they don't know if he's coming back, if he's alive or dead. And what else can we set up? She sort of is a farm girl. She takes care of the livestock and the chores and such. But she does have this dream of being a dancer in the picture shows. And she when she can, she sneaks away to catch a flick in town. And she has some, maybe you would call them desires that are not necessarily quote unquote normal. She's got a bit of a what would you call it?
A bit of a violent streak.
A violent streak. That's a good way of putting it. And so the movie is really an exploration of her finding herself and setting herself free from the shackles of this farm life. But it doesn't exactly work out. It doesn't, but it does, because she lives.
Right. It doesn't really work out for anyone as we may have hoped, though.
Yeah.
Okay. Great. I think that covers it. And she meets a dashing projectionist along the way.
Right.
All good. She's got a sister-in-law as kind of her only friend.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They go
who's well off. Her husband was well off. Actually, that's a pretty big theme in this. Is this? She's married somebody who, in her mind, kind of had it all and never had to work for anything. And there's a lot of resentment underneath that.
Yeah.
So it's all these things are making her want to get out and be free to kill.
Oh, Pearl. All right. Well, then let's get on here. So much to talk about for what worked. So let's do it. Here we go. What worked?
What worked? What worked for you? What worked for you? What worked for you? What worked for you?
It worked like a charm, Smith.
What worked? What worked for you?
Look, I think this is a really cool movie. In the broadest sense, just the sort of, I don't know, would you call it homage? I guess it's homage to the sort of, the golden age of Hollywood style of, film text. I don't know.
Well, it feels like it's a step beyond homage when it's fully part of the style and text. Like it's more than, I don't know. It's more ingrained than homage somehow, I want to say.
Yeah, it's so I think, man, there's so many things to kind of touch on. This, how would you describe this style itself? Because it is kind of it's modernizing a style from way back in film.
Yeah, I mean the sort of touchstones that are mentioned in the behind the scenes are Douglas Sirk melodramas and Wizard of Oz. As well
Wizard
with
of Oz. Yeah, it
as
does
well-
have that like color. Everything's so saturated in color. It's like, oh my god, the color pictures are here.
Right, as well as Disney and demented Disney, you could say.
Okay, yeah, I could see that. Yeah, those old Disney live action.
But what I think is helpful to be like, well, what is this doing at all in reference to genre is it's helpful now that we have X as well. So we're able to sort of go, all right, what are each of these doing to the subsequent things they're doing the things to? So, I mean, and yeah, this is top of what works for me about this film is combining the slasher story setup with this style. Like, what a interesting match that I mean, it's probably been done to some extent before, played with, but like this has not been done before. I hadn't seen it at least. And so I just think that overall, that's such a cool conceit for how to do a slasher series is rather than think, okay, there's just going to be more killings at the same barn, more people show up and Pearl gets killed, right after X or whatever. It's all about, okay, you just take the slasher thing that has this thread of this character or this world or this arc or whatever. It's one sort of person it's centered around, Pearl, and then the way you mix it up is you play with other time periods, but then have it be incorporating the horror subgenres / film styles of those time periods. I just think that's such a neat conceit for how to make multiple entries in a franchise. It's just so exciting, and it's just all about it. And that I think part of why it works so well is because you have the simplicity of kind of the classic slasher horror setup.
Yeah. Well, and also the simplicity of film from that era, right? Like you couldn't do a ton. You had to be one location or two locations because there are constraints. That's just the way it was. Having it all take place on the farm for the most part, it feels like an old movie in that sense. Like it's about one person. It's a very small cast, small story, right? There's not like a lot of story going on, but there's a lot of diving into this one person's like character, which I think for some reason, maybe it's just because we, as like in modern film, bigger and more and better and blah, blah, blah has become kind of a norm. But that, that was not always the case, right? Like I just think of movies from like the 70s and 60s where it really is just about like one person or a couple existing in their lives, and we get to explore their lives. And this feels like that, and I like that a lot.
I don't know if this is an ironic thing, but you do get bigger, more, and better in this. I mean, better because it's better, I think. But then why that is, it's bigger and more is because kind of like you mentioned, the character work that's going on here, you actually are able to hone in and do more of that. But then in hand with that too, you get the the opportunity to dig into these themes so much too. Like, I don't know if you remember when we talked about X, but just like word X in reference to all that's going on in it. Like, if this is when you have something that's like as rich or deep, like we were able to talk about in X or Broad, it's so cool to also then, when it is that deep or whatever, to be able to continue that conversation in these subsequent prequels, sequels.
Well, in particular, I think finding, like, so we talked a ton about like sexual repression and ageism and like being sexually liberated or just liberated as a woman in general in that movie. And like to come into this movie and suddenly kind of get context of a lot of those things. But like, it's not just saying, oh, you know, here's some context to let you know why she was the way she was in X. It's actually doing something else. It's adding this element of like a disturbing element, that she is disturbed, and like we have to kind of get on board and take the ride with her in this one as a young woman to kind of get a sense of like why that is. So it's not just saying like, oh, I don't know, in a simplistic way, oh yeah, she got beat up by her parents and that's why she's a killer in X. It's not that at all. It's way, way more layered and deep, and it's more of an exploration, I think, in this, in a good way, that's not super on the nose. Like, we get that she's experiencing a life that is a bit repressed, and she's got a parent who is pretty rigid and strict with her, but like that alone is not a reason to like want to kill people. So there's this added element of like, oh, okay, she is actually also like suffering from some pretty bad impulses.
Yeah.
Like it's not just nurture, right? There's a nature in her that wants to like hurt things, and she says that. She says repeatedly, I think something's wrong with me.
Yeah, so exactly. So you mentioned that if the themes in X were about more on sexuality, this one here I thought was pretty, I mean, it's never cut and dry, but I don't know, at least what I got of it or felt pretty strong to me was shifting that lens specifically of authenticity, the masks we wear, yada, yada, from sexuality to simply like the life we want to lead in our hopes and dreams sense versus the present sexuality sense, right?
Right. It's broadening these things from just this tighter lens of just sexuality and the experience at the end of life to the beginning of life, which is an exploration of identity and like, who am I? Like, where do I come from? What's my purpose? And those kind of things, which is, yeah, like rightly so. This is in a way a rite of passage film. You know, it's for her to figure out where she belongs in the world.
Yeah.
So it is the opposite, right? It's like you're taking the beginnings of adulthood and exploring that. So like sexuality is a part of that, but it's just a piece of the pie.
Well, it's so cool to see a character like this who's, you know, deranged on some level, but is in that sort of growing up. Like you kind of mentioned, a big part of that is deciding where we lie on these certain morals. So it's so interesting to see her kind of character wrestle with all this and how she falls on kind of each line. So the big one she's wrestling with, of course, is do I leave my abusive family behind, or even though I still love them, stay behind to help them and be here for my husband when he gets back and all that good stuff. But you see, it's when you see her, you know, that's the one she's wrestling with the whole movie. But when you see her where she's already fallen down on some things, it's so good. Like I love how the recurring thing where she's catching people in their lie that they aren't afraid of her. Oh no, don't worry, Pearl. I'm not going to tell anyone about this. Just let me live. Happens a couple times, but she's like straight up, well, I can read people. I know, you're lying. Why you tell me what you're going to tell me? And then also when she sees the stag film, and gets the intentions of the guy more clearly. Like she's holding something in too. It was such a good moment. She started to twitch then too, and her when she asked, "Oh, is this illegal?"
Right. Well, okay, so I think that you're touching on, to me, the coolest and most interesting thematic thing about this movie is, if you really, really boil this all down, what you're left with is a very simple kind of a binary thing of how the world tells you should be, like what life the world is telling you. So the external is saying, this is how you act, this is what your purpose is, this is who you should marry, this is like just the way that things are. And then you have her internal feelings, which are more hopes and dreams and like desires. And those two things are just kind of magnified so that they're at odds more so. But this recurring idea of like, I'm supposed to be this, but I want to be this, is, I think it's just really cool, because that's also true in X, right? It's basically breaking down the notion of like social norms or cultural norms or just norms in general, and saying like, yeah, but who made that up anyway? And is that in line with what we as humans want? And there in a way, as long as like, that's why I think this is such a cool concept. It's like that this is saying, hey, look, those rules are all arbitrary, right? Like we all just kind of made them up, and like, yeah, we kind of agree on things, but at the end of the day, like nobody should be forced to be put into a box of how they should be because of gender or because of like socioeconomics or any of these things. Like you should be able to do whatever you want. I mean, the projectionist literally says this. Like you can, if you want to leave, there's a road right there. You can just walk down it and end up in New York City. That is true. But where does that line end before you start doing things that are harmful to others? And I think like she can't see that line is super blurred for her, which makes her really interesting, because she's trying to answer that question throughout the whole movie.
Right. Should versus want, you're saying.
Yeah, in a way, because it's like I think we all can relate to being a teenager and feeling like we're trapped because we're being told how we're supposed to be. And we want to break out of that. Like we want individuality and to be able to exercise our desires and impulses and whatever, but people keep saying like, yeah, but you're not supposed to do this. Like, why did I go to college? I mean, I literally only went to college because that's what people told me you did and what everybody else was doing. In hindsight, I'm like, oh, well, that probably wasn't the greatest thing for me. Like I got what I got out of it and I don't regret it. But like, I probably would have benefited more by going to like I don't know, some sort of conservatory for film or acting or something like that. But I didn't even explore that option because I was convinced by the world around me that I had to go to college because that's what you did.
Right. So how given shoulds are you?
Yeah, exactly. This movie is kind of, it's that same basic thing of like the world and the people around you who do have perspective, right? Like they're older and whatever, but they themselves are also at the mercy of these ideas of norms and like what you should do. And generationally, we know that like those things break down often. And I mean, I think we all experience that. Now, you and I have seen it over the course of a couple generations, right? We experienced it as 16-year-olds, and then we watched a whole new generation experience it, and now we're doing it again. I'm older than you, but you're a tried and true millennial by age. And I'm not. Like, I'm the end of Gen X. So I'm basically an in-between Gen X and millennial. So I have both. So I've seen Gen X, I've seen millennials, and now I've seen Gen Z, and they're all very different. But there's sort of this through line of younger people wanting to break down the norms that don't work for them, and there's a natural resistance by the holders of those norms to that shift.
Right. We see
And
that
like,
with Pearl and his mother breaking down the natural shoulds.
Exactly. And so, I mean, man, I could go on and on, but that general overarching thematic thing, I think is so cool and so well done in this.
Well, something else you touched on, I didn't want to overlook as far as that shoulds versus want, and maybe this is like taking it to the extreme end where some shoulds really are things you can't control that aren't a matter of just as simple as, well, yeah, technically I can go down the road. But I thought the dance scene was just, I mean, I love these dance scenes.
Oh man, the
audition.
That whole scene is amazing.
It's like, oh my God, I loved it so much. So yeah, but as far as what I was saying about like what it's doing with those ideas of shoulds versus wants, you have. So, I mean, yeah, I think the thing that we like to believe, if we're thinking positive or being told as far as what to do, in that sort of should versus want dilemma, is as long as you're being true to yourself and not hurting other people, then things will work out how they should, right? Like there's how you find the should. Almost in doing a true want in touch with your true self, you end up in the greater should. That's why it's so good and so tragic. And then also, with the greater themes in this of authenticity, like, and all that. So we have this example where she gives it her all by showing her full authenticity in this most like endearing, just like going all out, super sincere dance, which I then just loved so much because they just nailed the style of doing it in this period. It's just so good.
Yeah.
Like, it's like, you're just imagining like a kind of modern dance movie where someone goes all out. It's this cool, crazy, like breakdance thing, hip hop thing. You're like, whoa, awesome. But just to see that same joy and talent brought to dance being limited to this period, I just loved it so much, and she did it so well. But anyway, so basically, yeah, think of it like full earnestness on display is full authenticity on display, right? What this movie's all about, and she does it full here, and we like to believe that that's going to set us on the right path to lead us to our dreams and whatnot, where we're supposed to be. But instead, she gets rejected, and it's for a should that she has no control over by these people who tell her, well, she should be blonde and younger. Right? So it's just the most amazing. It's like, yeah, all these ideas we're talking about, it's sort of the two extremes being put up against each other and like reaching that head, which totally justifies her freak out, I think, especially knowing the home that she comes from, where she finally sheds all her vulnerable layers, most authentic self, and then is shut down for a should she has no control over.
That's like the most important point, right? Mm-hmm. Is the control aspect of it. And the sort of emotional, I guess you would call it, it's like emotional instability that she, like expectations versus reality. It's like she can't comprehend the rejection because she did the best she's ever done. So, so in her mind, therefore, she should be rewarded for that. But she doesn't have. This is why I love that she's been brought up in this kind of isolation realm. Is that she doesn't have the broader sort of context of, you don't always get the reward in even if you do your best, right? Like there's a bigger world out there with different perspectives that you might just not fit into. I mean, talk about like the experience of being an actor.
Right.
I think this is sort of just my personal experience, but I think it's fairly universal with actors. It's like coming to terms with the fact that the job is the audition, not the reward of winning the actual role. Because you're going to be rejected like almost 100% of the time. Like, and most of the time, it has nothing to do with talent or effort. It has everything to do with things that are out of your control. And until you can come to terms with that as an actor, you're going to have a really like unpleasant time.
Yeah. Stepping onto in auditions like that, you're stepping onto the X, which we get the great shot of in this film, where in her auditions, he's stepping onto the X, which for me, just always, whenever an X appears in these X movies, you got to go, okay, now I'm looking at it through this lens of what this means here. So it's cool to think of stepping onto the X as stepping into the target, which means stepping into your authenticity to be judged by the gods.
Right, and from the perspective of the stepper, the X's sort of could also be, the X could be correlated to the treasure map, right? Like this is X on the map that's going to give you the treasure. And having it not result in that just makes it that much more tragic. Because you have these two conflicting perspectives, right? You have the world that she perceives and thinks that she belongs in, and then the actual world of whatever, let's say the town or society or whatever you want to call it. And I like the casting of those people, they're all much older, right? Like they're in their, 50s or so. And so there's this huge gap of perspective between them, the generational gap. So yeah, I mean, I like all of these things. It's such a well-constructed story and film, in spite of the sort of, ostensibly simple, aspects of it.
No, it's because of that. That's what we always come back to.
Yeah.
I feel like
I love that.
Simplicity and conflict is what lets you get richer.
Yeah, like having as a detail, having her see, her dead parents in the panel of judges in that scene is amazing. Like it's exactly right. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Her ultimate judgers.
Right. I mean, we haven't even really touched on the fact that she's killing people.
Right. Well, I mean, true. Well, but while we're still on kind of themes and all that, I feel like it's the perfect opportunity to mention the two brilliant long takes in this film that happened towards the end, where we have her monologue, which is basically just, I mean, I guess, yeah, it's a thing that's done, but just it's done so well here, where you think, all right, so this is a monologue where someone just agrees to bear their deepest truths and be, and it's like what the person across them is just asking them to do. And then when they do it, it ends up being too much for that other person. But just as far as form, it's, I mean, long takes can be tricky and you really got to justify them. I don't know if you really have to. They're always kind of great, but I just say it's a great use of it too. If you have a monologue like that, I mean, just makes sense. Well, what's more authentic than just looking at them the whole time and seeing it in full, and ending with that moment where she looks up to be like, all right, well, what do you think? How it ends.
Well, it's also, it's constructed in a way that like eases us into it too. So like there are, shot, reverse shot. And I think there's like 3 different setups, or maybe 4 different setups. I think it's 3. There's like one main reverse of the sister-in-law, and then there's 2 main over the shoulders. One's a fairly close and standard one, and then the other one's a little bit off kilter. And I think that's the one that we end up sitting on for the rest of the intense monologue. Because they ease us into it initially. We get a couple of reverses, and then once it starts to get into the monologue, we settle in. But we've been we've been told visually, like the language of it has said, okay, hang on, we got you. Okay, now ready, go. Here we are.
Yeah. And then of course the other long take I was referring to was the end credits forced smile.
Amazing.
Smiling
I mean,
through
that's
the
one of the
pain.
most amazing things I've ever seen.
Right? Her doing it. I just love so
think
much.
like, okay, so just as a thing, as a choice from a like a directing point of view, it's amazing. But her acting is like kind of unbelievable.
Yeah.
And it made me just sort of think like, why aren't we pushing to that level all the time? Now, there is a reason, because it's really hard. And like very few people, I think, actually can do what she's doing in this film.
I mean, this was more things of note to answer that question, but I think it comes from a love of film and aspiring to live up to that respect that comes from that love,
Well, yeah, but I think I'd almost take it one step further. But, well, that's the foundation of it. But apropos to the themes of the movie, there's a permission structure. Like Ty West and Mia Goth said to themselves initially and to each other that we're allowed to go there. We're allowed to take it to this place. There's so much to be said about that, like giving permission to yourself as an artist. That, like, I think we spend a lot of time, I certainly do, saying like, oh, that's a cool idea, but here's reasons why you shouldn't go there.
Shoulds, Tim, get rid of them.
Exactly. And that is the movie, right? Like sort of what the movie's about. So to double down on that theme and then actually go there as the actor is really quite something to see. I mean, I'm just like, I kept thinking to myself, like, she's not going to get the recognition that she deserves for this. It's in the same way that I felt like Toni Collette wasn't going to get the recognition she deserved for Hereditary. Like there are these, in horror in particular, I think there are women most of the time doing things and going to places as actors that nobody else is doing. And we don't, for some reason, as a, I don't know, film society, like give them the praise or the recognition that I think that they have earned, which is weird, but whatever.
Blame it on the Academy.
Yeah, I mean, whoever the powers that be that like this decided, again, I mean, actually, in a way, this is the theme of the movie again, right? There's a group of people that are of a generation that have a norm that horror films, for some reason, aren't allowed to be recognized as art. And it's like, how about you fuck right off?
Yeah, I mean, it takes a Silence of the Lambs. I don't know what to say,
Yeah. That was like 30 years ago, too.
Right. Exactly. I don't know, just because I think I can relate these things to the themes of authenticity and our outward appearances. I loved the rotting maggot infested pig right?
It is so good.
Because it starts off as, okay, representing a gift, a sort of a nice, beautiful gesture, right? Being delivered to them by the sister-in-law. And then the fact that it's left outside and disregarded, it's like this family, this den of what evil is where my mouth was going, but just not good feelings coming from that house, right? You know, they're gonna reject this gift in a certain way. It was just enough of a nice visual motif of all that to see the maggots forming on it. But then I was just so elated and surprised that they found a way to work it in and pay off the pig she's presenting it on the table with the dead corpses with the corpses of her parents for when her beloved husband gets home from the war, where it's like that she's decided now, okay, well, I'm going to step into my should here and be a good farmhouse wife to my husband when he gets back from the war and have everything all set up nice for him. It's just putting the horror underneath it all, just outwardly, that dinner table set up, and have her working it with that pig is just so perfect. I loved it so much.
Well, there's a lot of sort of putting the mirror up, you know, this sort of the reflection and the authenticity of self, and the reflection is it's a mirror of that. So what you see is not actually what reality is to everybody else. And that's, again, the same theme over and over again. And that dinner setting scene is, to me, this is like, it's so brilliant of direction to do well, it's not in camera, but like in the visual, you are doing a split reflection of that entire scene, right? You're doing this down the middle, center of frame. I don't know how do I explain this, Ryan? It's a mirror, right? Like,
I forget. Wait, was there a literal effect going on?
Yeah. So in that entire scene, the action is mirrored down the middle. So like when she presents the pig, for example, I think you see the head on right and left of...
You can call that like vignetting or cropping or windows or something like that.
Yeah, I don't know how you would describe it, but it's almost like a kaleidoscope, right? It's like, but it's just one thing down the middle. And that, that is just reinforcing this theme, this sort of mirrored reality versus, I guess you would say reality versus expectations or dreams or whatever.
Yeah.
Or what you perceive versus reality, in particular, as like specific to Pearl. And just having that whole thing in and of itself be a distorted reflection. The act itself is a distorted reflection, right? Because she's setting the table for a family dinner to welcome back her husband, but the reality is just much more dark and twisted in a way, because that's her brain. It's this schism between those two things.
Well, it touches on that, that thing that just humans go through and changes over time that we've been talking about, where we have this sort of, this is right, this is wrong. And she even admits to the projectionist, sometimes I wonder, because I never in the outside world, basically, if I'm crazy as in terms of how am I out of step with these sort of things that, the rest of civilization, the rest of humanity, the rest of our society has. So I just thought and I think I could get us to talk about the transition to the violence and horror moments here for us. But another example of just where that was going on, kind of like what you're saying, and in the ending also, is I loved how she dresses her dad up like in his finest suit before killing him, right?
Right.
It's as if she says we know she does love him, you know?
Yeah.
She just thinks she's in her being in that moment. She just thinks she is doing the just moral thing, right? So I was looking at that in contrast with when she kills the goose, and just thinking of like killing animals and like, okay, well, if we're like, what's the difference really between here of her, you know, killing the goose this way versus putting them in the slaughterhouse or whatever, right? And it's just all in the kind of like ritual for it or whatever, right? Like ideally we'd want, I think when, you know, whether it's a person or an animal passing on for whatever purpose, we want it under the construct of some kind of acknowledgement of what's happening, you know, give it the space. And I think giving it the physical space for it, giving it the time for it, all that helps with that. So, you know, and that's exactly what she's doing with dressing up her dad, right? Giving him that respect as she sees it. But it was just so interesting to think, well, why is it struck us as so just like there's something off and wrong with her with killing the goose? It's because she does it in a way where it's like, different from how she's treating that cow, I guess. She's actually taking some kind of like pleasure in it, it feels like, which is the difference. And it's here and now versus like, okay, we're going to take the goose off and lay it down and do whatever ritualized killing of it that we do deem acceptable.
Right. But I like that it's sort of, it becomes a little bit blurry too, because the next thing she does is feed the goose to the alligator.
Right. That's what I was going to say. The way she's acting could almost be like she's an extension of the alligator. She's channeling the alligator's just bloodlust in that moment, because she's like, gonna feed my best friend alligator, you know?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I kind of feel like the big thing with the violence is the impetus that like, except for the goose killing, every other kill, she is sort of brought to this state of, it's like she's provoked. Well, she believes she's provoked. Let's put it that way. Into this state, and that she just cannot like put a lid on it, right? Like she can't contain her reaction to whichever thing it is. So we could go through them. With the projectionist, there's an inherent rejection. I mean, it's all about rejection, actually, right? She thinks that things are going in one direction because of this kind of fantasy that she's constructed, that he played a big part in constructing with her, right? So he basically said, yeah, you know, you could do anything. We could go off to Europe. We could that's where life is cooler. So let's do that, as sort of a ploy just to sleep with her. But then once that happens and he starts to sense that something's off with her, he immediately bails out, and that rejection leads her to her reaction, which is to kill him. The same is true for her mom, right? There's an inherent rejection of her as her child, and in a way almost saying like, you know, I reject you as my daughter. I don't want you. I don't love you. And that, you know, that provokes this violence in her.
Well, it's important to mention, though, all this is rejection in face of her showing her authentic self, too. She's opening up to these people about, all right, well, I'm going to tell you who I am.
And then the next one is the actual rejection in the audition, and knowing who got it. Although I was not entirely sure if in reality, did the sister-in-law get the part, or did she just feel like she had to say that she got it because Pearl is so convinced that she got it?
I think it's pretty set. I think it's pretty set up in the movie that she got it, that she did get the part, because we've sort of established in the world of this movie, like Pearl has that like read between the lines, sixth sense almost.
Oh, there's also a clue, I think, in that all of the girls coming out of the audition have dark hair. I think
that's great. That's the case.
I think that the sister-in-law is the only blonde in that sequence. So yeah, that like let's just make that assumption if it's not as clear as it was intended.
What you're talking about here, and like this constant rejection she's getting, I mean, for good reason. I mean, she's admitting to, murder and all that and threatening them. But it's just that effect in itself of getting rejected makes me like root for her and endeared for her in this caught up with the protagonist movie sense. And that's just something that really worked for me about this, is that like fascinating thing that's happening where, just like Judy Garland or whatever, I'm rooting her to get to achieve all her dreams. It's just so interesting and funny how that is pulled off. Like where I just liked her and I wanted her to get that audition so bad, despite everything else. I just fascinated with that.
We over the last 20 some odd years, our culture has created a number of television shows that are just that premise, right? Like the premise of the undiscovered person showing up and triumphing, in front of a panel of judges, right? Like American Idol is literally that construct. And American Idol has the specific thing that this movie is doing, which is, in a way, I mean, I think it's a little exploitative, but the phase of the show that is my favorite is the auditions, like the initial auditions, where you get to see people who, fascinatingly to me, have no clue that they're not talented because they've been either too sort of in like similar to Pearl, they've been they're too in their own little box or their own little world. They don't have perspective, or they don't have people around them giving them that perspective, like people who can actually like speak to whether or not they're in tune. And what makes it so much more sort of sometimes funny, sometimes heartbreaking, is the people who are surrounded by people who just say, "Oh yeah, you're amazing, you're great, you're going to do great," and they're essentially lying to them. And then they get put on this stage to effectively be humiliated. And like watching somebody go through that is like, I mean, for lack of a better term, it's really good TV. Because we respond to that. Like we, on a human level, I think that's why those shows are successful, is because there's something about watching people go through that experience, good or bad, like schadenfreude or not, like we enjoy that. There's something about it. I think it's what you're saying. You're seeing this authentic, vulnerable thing happen. And then like when the like when the walls crumble around them, we're like, oh my God, that's quite something to take in.
Wait, take us back to Pearl here.
So these rejections are the same. Like that audition is the same construct. She has an expectation of how things should go. And when she's rejected, she's like, it doesn't compute. Her brain goes, wait, what?
It's more of a hope than an expectation, I want to say.
Sure. Yeah. But she, in in the disbelief that she has in being rejected, there's a moment of like, none of this makes any sense because I just did my best. And that thing, that way of looking at it is a huge part of these shows, right? Like on both sides, the rejection side and the acceptance side. Like so you'll often see people like give it their all and they get the praise, they get accepted, and they can't believe it. Their brains are like, what? Like that was good?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, Pearl, it's different though because it's same in those ways and places, but where it is different is she's really just looking for grounding in what is right or wrong and how she should, if what she's experienced, if how she is does mean she's, deserving of love or not in a way.
Mm-hmm.
She's, as she says up front, like I said already, she tells the projectionist, I don't know how I am because I'm never around other people. So she's in these moments basically testing that to finally know how she is and only getting met with a tepid, okay, Pearl, well, I got left some tea on the stove there. I got to get a tent, it's all she's met with.
Yeah, you make that's a really good point. I think you could take this entire movie as an exploration of seeking love and validation through love, because that's definitely not something she's getting.
Yeah.
And she doesn't have any real context for that. Like she's not getting the love that she needs or wants from her family. She's not getting it from her husband. He's not there.
So she gets it from a scarecrow.
Right, exactly, because it's like it's a perversion of that because she doesn't have anything else.
Yeah.
I mean, that scene is like the design of the scarecrow is so good. Like that is one of the more disturbing masks I've ever seen.
Why is that?
I don't know. I kept being like, why is this freaking me out? It's almost too lifelike.
Yeah, it's that exact kind of like whatever that specific thing is when you look at like there's an internet thing that says like 20 of the most terrifying Halloween costumes from the 1800s or whatever, for like the 1920s.
Right, yeah.
It's just like, what were people like, what were they thinking back then? Where did they come up with this? It felt like that.
Yeah, like, did they think that was not scary?
I mean, they just probably
utterly
were like,
terrifying.
Gotta scare the scarecrows.
Yeah. That scene is so good, though, because, like, she doesn't have the ability to express herself authentically most of the time. In this moment, when she's actually alone for once, she gets to, and we look at it and we think, oh, that's weird or disturbing potentially, or like inappropriate or blah, like whatever sort of dumb knee-jerk reaction we have to it. But at its core, it's her finally having an opportunity to feel something.
Right. And it's you can look at it as, what is her sexual fantasy there in that moment, right? Like what is she not getting elsewhere that she wants here? And it's a sort of trust in her through her vulnerability,
And I love that the dance scene with the scarecrow is kind of the impetus of it, right? Like, I don't think that she was like, hey scarecrow, let me just ride it so I can have an orgasm.
Right, exactly.
Like she sees the scarecrow and she's just had this experience with this handsome fella, and she's got to exercise her emotions, right? Like how that's making her feel. So it's again just like what am I trying to say? It's again a example of following through genuinely with the state of, or your emotional state, which in some realms is good, and in other realms with her is not so good, right? But that is kind of the one thing that she doesn't possess. The thing that makes her different is she doesn't have the, I don't know what you would call it, like let's call it like the valve that other people have to tamp down the emotional like flood.
Right.
And so when it happens and it's bad, she like kills a person. She pitchforks them.
Yeah. On her dancing with the scarecrow, I just got to mention, and it's fun to mention here, connections to X. Remember, that's her intimacy that she's seeking with her other character, Maxine. Mia Goth's other character, Maxine. So you have Mia Goth as old Pearl wanting to dance with Maxine and X, and it's the same thing here of just well, not totally, but still the same idea of just, you know, dance representing something for her, or scratching that itch for her of just that immediate intimacy.
Yeah. Okay, I feel like we've pretty much done our due diligence on all of these themes. Let's actually talk about the violence itself.
All right.
Because
it worked for you.
It's so good. So the payoff is what I really love about it. So the first one being the projectionist. The POV shot of him leaving. So he leaves the barn after sort of rejecting her and saying, like, you're scaring me. And we follow him, like the camera, as we realize, I think pretty quickly that it's Pearl's POV, but it follows him and wraps around him behind the car. Like, he gets in the car, we know it's coming, and the camera moves around the car, staying behind him the whole time. And he looks back at the barn, and she's not there anymore, and then turns, you know, the other way toward camera, and suddenly she's there and you know, pitchforks him. The construction of that shot alone is really, really amazing. Like the feel of it, the pace of it, like it's essentially, I assume, a steady cam shot. Like it's super smooth. It's eerie, right? There's something really fun and eerie about follow shots like that. And obviously the context, because it's like the perfect way to signal to us, the audience, that he's in deep shit. Yeah. Like here, it's basically like the steps up the stairs, right? It's like dun 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 dun. Here it comes. He's about to get killed. And I just love how well it plays. Like it feels so good.
It was a good reminder for me too, where it being an axe, where it's so easy for me to go, or no, wait, do I have it mixed up?
It's the pitchfork.
It's the pitchfork, yeah. Right? And it's the axe later for the sister-in-law, though.
For the sister-in-law, yeah.
So in that moment too, it's another great shot. Also, the staging of that. It was just that nice reminder, kind of like how this movie overall, it's like, you know, the simplicity of the slasher, then with all this stuff built around it, where it's so easy for me to go, okay, axe, you know, we've seen it before. Even, you know, pitchfork, the Friday the 13th movies, okay. But at the same time, it's like, you know what? There's just something just classic and satisfying about it. No need to not just do it again. How satisfying to have that axe kill be the weapon. Satisfying.
Also, they do exactly the thing that you want, right? Like, they set up the weapons. In the very beginning of the movie, she does a dance routine with the pitchfork, you know, in front of the wall in the barn that she pitchforks the director of the porn in X. Mm-hmm. Right? So it's like they're all linking these sort of, you know, visuals together. And so she kills the goose with the pitchfork as well. So it's like we're getting the appropriate setups of these things. We see the mom chopping wood with the axe twice, I think, before the final scene of Pearl coming out, and very, very intimidatingly calm as she just like wanders over to the axe and pulls it out. and just calmly walks after the sister-in-law.
Oh, God,
I mean,
I love it.
it's just a brilliant shot, and it's a tracking shot or some sort of, it's probably Steadicam or a long dolly or whatever it was. I'm not sure, but either way, yeah, I don't know. Maybe they had a Technicrane. I don't know, but it is this smooth, moving shot, and it's just like, I just love that style. I don't know what it is. I think there's something about movement through space while anticipating a clear finality. I think that maybe this is why we like push-ins. Like when somebody's having a moment, we tend to push in on them. There's something about that movement through space of the camera into or away from a moment.
I mean, at least in the case of this shot, it gives you a sense of anticipation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. Maybe I think that's what it is. I think that's what that type of movement does. Is it builds the anticipation.
Yeah. Well, since you mentioned, more the filmmaking side of it, as far as design, whatnot, kind of, sort of. Just one thing I wanted to mention on all that, since we kind of, touched on, well, what would you call this whole aesthetic going on here? It's doing something really interesting that I love, that only kind of, I cued in what that was when I was reading other reviews, and there's Nick Allen's review on RogerEbert.com when talking about sort of the production design and the multi-piece huge orchestra or the orchestral score, the aesthetics of all that. He says the aesthetic gambit of Pearl registers more as being cute than immersive, and kind of saying what did not work for him. Well, I disagree. I thought when it starts, it's cute, but not in a bad way. It's just sort of different and fun and lending a novelty to it all. Mm-hmm. And then, but as we go on, I think it does become fully immersive because it's so easy. Well, like we start with, viewing Pearl. She's in line with this aesthetic, right? Just who she is as a character. Oh, I dream of being in the movies, just all that,
right? How
she looks. But then as the movie goes on, we get an actual deep three-dimensionality to her that I think we can relate to as modern people, with her monologue and all her, that complexity that we do see there. So what's so interesting is I think as she becomes more dimensional, the aesthetics that go along with the movie do too. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like a way that we get wrapped up in those in that in the what did he say, the device, the technique, the paint strokes that are those aesthetics. It's like they work because the character brings us into the world where those are just normalized again.
Yeah. I totally disagree with that guy's take too, because like exactly what you're saying, like the film style is a extension of the character. So to me, it's exactly correct.
Yeah.
So what are you talking about, man?
Yeah. I think it's just a little different at first, and you can kind of one can quickly just kind of sort that, like, like we're talking about the movie, make a quick moral assessment one way or the other, a quick assessment one or the other. This is weird, different, okay,
right,
bad, great, over it.
Yeah.
The last thing,
not the best way to critique.
I mean, I know that I remember, I don't mean to call him out or Adam. Sorry, Dad, if you're listening to this, but we finished watching. It's that movie with God, I can't remember any names right now. It's that movie with Mark Duplass and Elizabeth Moss, where it's like there's doubles of them or something, and they're like, I forget what it's called. It's just kind of weird, like a movie that you'd expect them to be in together. And when it ended, immediately, as soon as like the credits had probably barely started, and my dad was like, that was weird. Ryan, what did you think? And I'm like, well, it just ended. I don't know. Like, let me like, I don't know, a good movie should leave you with a feeling, not like an immediate assessment as to like which, side of the box it fell on. I don't know. Anyway,
Right. Yeah.
Nor we're probably being too harsh on Nick Allen here too, but sorry, Nick. It's more just an example of, I don't know, whatever else we're talking about here. Last thing I did have was I just sort of connections, things that I liked that were other connections to X was the pornography connection. I thought it was just so much fun after having X be all sex porn centric to have one of the earliest porn films here on display.
Yeah, was that an actual?
Yes, it was.
Okay, we wondered, but we were wondering if that was the case. That's cool.
It's called A Free Ride.
Hey,
which the little inner titles cracked me up on that so much. I loved it.
Yeah.
All right. Well, is that it for what worked for you?
Oh man, is it? I don't know. No, I mean, I don't know. Maybe I'm beating a dead horse or whatever you would call it, but I do think there is something so...
You're stabbing a dead goose.
Yeah. Just so incredible about Mia Goth in general. Like, she possesses this very strange, almost duality. Like, she's so beautiful in moments and then can on just on a fucking the thinnest line just switch over to this like very unsettling, like possessed thing. And like, I'm just super, super impressed. The crying outside of the church after the audition was, I'm like, it was upsetting and like impressive to me. I don't know. Maybe that's just like from an acting point of view or something. But everything about like her choices and what she's doing and like the fervor with which she goes about it and like this character, I wonder too, her having a writing credit, how much that was her just being like, this is my fucking movie. Like I'm like, let me like get the input out there and like put my stamp on it. So like, I think she's incredible. And I want to see more of what she has to offer with this trilogy. So we'll get to that eventually. But I guess just to say, like, I think she's amazing.
That's good. I'm glad you mentioned her because for what worked, can't not mention her.
Yeah. I mean, she is the movie and it's, and the movie is called Pearl. It's not like some arbitrary name and then we're just watching some person live in that world. It's like the movie is Pearl. Pearl is Mia Goth. Like this is her film.
Yep. And I love it for that.
Yeah.
All right. Then we can move on with that to our next section. What did not work?
It's not ready yet.
Seems to work okay.
No, something important's missing.
What did not work?
My initial feeling, and I assume that this changes with multiple viewings, but they're stylistically, and this is something that I think Ty West has done in most of the films of his that I've seen. It is his sort of style to have what feels like kind of a long or slow burn, drawn out thing. And in the moment watching it for the first time, I kind of found myself being like, okay, like we're still like, I kind of felt like I get it. I get where we're at. Do we need to continue to belabor this? And like, part of me thinks you could have gotten to the point faster. And part of me thinks that that's a terrible take and way to look at it.
It's funny you're saying this at all, because like when I was watching this, I'm like, oh wow, like maybe it's because of the subgenre influences of it. It's for the first time, it's Ty West not seeming like he even wants to or needs to do what we'd always think of as the Thai West thing of taking your time. That was when I was watching this, I'm like, oh, that's just totally non-existent. It's like a snappy, like traditional paced, whatever film.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I just think that this is it's not a really good reaction. Like I'm criticizing myself here. I kept thinking, like let's get to the killing, right? But which is dumb, but it's a dumb way of looking at it.
I mean, it starts off where she like stabs a goose with a pitchfork and throws it into the mouth of an alligator.
Yeah, I know. But then there's like 45 minutes of like her existing in the world.
Well, it was for me, it's like like they say with good movies where it's like a horror, sci-fi, fantasy, enjoy if they're really working, you should be enjoying the movie before it gets to those aspects, right?
Right.
Like before it gets to the thing. And I was just so into her story and her world before it got to any killing, for sure. But
yeah, it's actually just an expectation thing. I think I went in thinking it was going to be a bloodbath or something. I don't know. So I think that this is a bad take on my part. That feeling was sort of silly, and that probably I'll watch it again and not feel that way. Part of the construct of the film is that we're in this one place, we're in this house, and we're reinforcing these themes for basically the first half of the film. And in the moment, I was like, I think I was too eager to get on with it.
Yeah, just try to imagine like how impactful and woe it was when she set the mom on fire and that fight happened where it did versus if it had happened in the first 25 minutes or whatever.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's a lesson, I think, in understanding like what you need to do to set up to get to a thing, and that we shouldn't fall into this trap of like, you got to have a scare every 7 minutes or some bullshit like that. And also, it is its own. I think, I guess I'm going back to what worked, but like, I think that there are going to be people who don't like this movie for this reason, and I think that they, myself included, need to like take a step back and understand that this movie is existing outside of a lot of our expectations of how film should go right now.
This is exactly how film should go right now. This was totally my speed. I loved it.
Like, we should be commending that more as opposed to being like, wow, it's, it's different and it's doing its own thing, and that somehow that's like a bad thing. So I don't know. I guess I'm just expressing a weird and I think unfounded initial reaction.
You just didn't know going into it how much you should be expecting Friday the 13th or not.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So whatever. It's great. Maybe I'm a buy. I don't know.
Well, you have our episode's wrapping up here, Tim. We have one more section to get to for you to decide. So should we get to it?
Sure.
All right, here we go. Things of note.
Things of note!
This should be interesting.
I just got to mention there's a weird thing going on. It feels like, when things are in the air in filmmaking and are whatever. I made a short film called Smile that was all about just taking that obvious theme motif of smiling through the pain and someone forcing a smile. And it was a trip to see first that come up again with a teaser trailer for a movie called Smile, another feature film called Smile that is the exact same thing, or not the exact same, but that same idea as far as smiling being intense and creepy as far as smiling through the pain, and then to see it come up a third time here with The End of Pearl, which of course I love too, but same impetus that I was chasing. So it's just weird how right now, just wanted to note it for the record books here in our episode 2021 into 2022, the period of using smiles that way is in the air.
Yeah.
So you want a bit more on what we can expect next for the third movie?
Yeah, I mean, I initially was like trying to make the connection of who Maxine is, but you've reminded me that that's the character in X.
Yes.
Right?
And you watched
Okay.
the teaser trailer at the end of the movie?
Yes.
Cool.
Which is,
So-
I mean, I love it that we're going to jump into the 80s here.
And Gary, it makes perfect sense, and I'm so excited for it. So if X is to 70s grindhouse cinema, or that's not the wrong way to put it. X is doing the grindhouse cinema thing. Pearl's doing the Technicolor Wizard of Oz aesthetic. Then we're gonna have Maxine doing, I think, the 80s video nasty thing is what one would expect. So I'm super excited for that. But it's interesting to think too when you also think of how each one, we didn't even put the theme in this way, but it's also the themes sort of revolve around this idea of our relationship to cinema, where
Right. Totally.
yeah, for each one, I mean, that's in X, it's in Pearl. So it'll be really interesting to see how Maxine continues that thematic trend as well as the aesthetic one.
Right. Because, I mean, you can assume, I guess, that since Maxine in X wants to be in the movies, and it's that type of sort of pre home video pornography X-rated film, and then Pearl wants to be in the movies in the same sense of these like dancing girl, whatever you call those little, what are those called? Little shorts? I don't know, but
Yeah.
like of the time. So let's assume Maxine in the 80s is going to want to be in, I don't know, like what's like the famous VHS, like big box pornography industry of the 80s. I don't
Or
even
maybe
know
she's
if
trying to
there's-
break out of porn.
Oh yeah, that'd be cool. And like become an actual, like legit quotes around that actress. That'd be interesting.
Well, it's. I mean, yeah, I think we can expect what the stylistic thing and what the subgenres it might be pulling from, from the 80s, horror 80s. But as far as the kind of horror, I wonder if or how they're going to venture from the crazy person killing people, because Pearl's left the picture now, right?
Right.
So you'd think it'd have something to do with maybe Maxine being affected by these murders. And I wonder if they're going to pull from, I mean, my hope and expectation would be to somehow still find a way to pull from 80s slashers into this one. But at the same time, maybe there's another sort of subgenre. It's going to be a little twist on that. We don't know what they're going to do yet. So it'll be interesting to see what the story is in that sense.
Yeah. Huh.
So would you, if you're going to rewatch, let's say you're getting set for Maxine, are you going to watch them in the order they came out or story chronological order? Watch it Pearl and then X.
Ooh. No, I think I would watch them in the order they came out. I think.
Why?
Well, that's a good question. I feel like it feels like it makes sense to go from Maxine to the history of Pearl to back to Maxine, but I'm not sure why that is. I guess it would be cool to go Pearl X Maxine as a continuation.
I mean, how it's the order is of release, there's a come full circle satisfaction, I think we're getting.
Yeah. I don't know. Either I think would work.
Cool. I'm just excited to try watching them chronological order and see what that does. When hearing about the influences for this film, for both Mia Goth and Ty West, I already mentioned Wizard of Oz. They said they just kind of watched that as almost a palate cleanser from X. Just get away from this world we've been in. Not so much as a direct inspiration though, but the one, a few that I thought were interesting and just came to mind when we were talking about it. Mia Goth referenced Whatever Happened to Baby Jane, which you think that centerpiece audition scene, I mean, spot on. And then she also referenced Dancer in the Dark and thinking of the main character in that. And then Ty West mentioned also just like Technicolor movies, and then specifically the red shoes for Technicolor movies.
Oh, what was that, Dancer in the Dark?
Yeah.
What is that? I don't know that movie.
It's
Do
the
I?
one. Yeah, it's the one starring Bjork. That's by what's his face?
I have not seen it.
Lars von Trier.
Yeah. That's interesting. Okay.
I recommend
Maybe I should
it.
go watch that.
We watched it in film musicals class in college.
Whoa.
Check it out.
Interesting. Okay,
Great.
cool.
Any other things of note you had for Pearl?
Oh, I don't know. Do you think we're gonna get the alligator in Maxine?
We gotta get the alligator.
It'll be like on Universal Studios, like the back lot, like the tour.
Right. I could see some sort of cold open with sending us off with the alligator. I don't know. That sort of, tying the events of the end of X to bring us into this one.
What if in the
opening
opening scene we're at the pond, and the camera falls into the water and floats down to the bottom, and there's a TV and a VCR there, and the alligator shows up with a VHS in its mouth, and he puts it into the VCR and presses play with his little claws, and the movie starts, and that's the opening.
I think you got it, Tim. You heard it here
I'd be
first,
into that.
folks. Oh yeah, talking about the alligator too, Tim. You just reminded me of a moment that worked so well in the film I wanted to mention, which was when she takes the alligator egg away to she's gonna save it and keep it on her own, and then we're going as the audience, or at least I was. Oh, this is her main alligator that we see years later that she befriends. Right. That's her little buddy, eats people, and then to have her crush it. Which is
crush it, and then cut to her husband exploding on the driveway coming up to the farm at the exact same moment was amazing.
So it was just that I just want to mention that too, because it was a cool moment about going against our sort of expectations maybe, but just how smart that is and how that puts you on a level. Just puts you on a certain receptive level when your expectations are being subverted. So it's just very smart to do that kind of thing.
Oh, I have a question because I didn't rewatch X. Is Howard her husband in X? Because is it the same person?
I just assumed so. I didn't rewatch it either. I just assumed so. Yeah. I mean, why wouldn't it be? Yeah.
Right. Well, so that whole idea is just so crazy too, to think that all she wanted was to get away. She goes through all this stuff, and then when her husband comes home, he's met with that dinner scene, which is quite arresting. But then he sticks around.
Well, it made sense for me. I mean, it was the perfect setup because he's that look on his face at the end. He knows he can't leave again.
Yeah.
And that's almost
cool.
Not only
it is Howard. Yeah, I just double checked the plot of X. So yes.
But you know what I mean?
Wow.
Where I just thought it perfectly set up their dynamic in X, where he sort of says, "Oh, she's dangerous." He's almost his her caretaker, but also her prisoner because she will go after him. I mean, maybe in X, so much time has passed, she won't really care anymore, but the idea is there.
Okay, so I'm changing my mind. I think that these should be watched in sequence.
Okay.
Or at least that's how I'm gonna do it.
Great. Cool. All right. And that's all I had for things of note. So I think if that's it for Pearl, is that it for Pearl, Tim? Are you still a rent it?
Yeah.
All right, then we'll wind down with our recommendations here.
For now.
Okay.
I might be a box set buy. We'll see how Maxine is.
Great. Me too. I'm going to recommend Dead. I saw the new release film 3,000 Years of Longing. I had to go see the blank check George Miller film, just that he got from the Fury Road Mad Max success. And it was cool. It was just, exactly what we're asking for nowadays when we go to the movies, but then people don't seem to actually go and see them as I want something interesting, different, and original. And it was all those things, and all the flashback stories were my favorite. It was good. Yeah, check it out.
Nice.
3,000 Years of Longing.
I started House of the Dragon, the Game of Thrones show. It's pretty good.
Do you recommend it?
Yeah. For some reason, I think people are giving it, they're like, it's boring or something like that. It's like, did you watch Game of Thrones? Like, Game of Thrones is a lot of people just talking about stuff. So, like give it a chance here. Like, I'm sure somebody's head will get cut off. Like, we'll get there. But I like it. It's cool. I like continuing the sort of the lore of that stuff. So yeah, check it out. It's on HBO Max.
In closing, this is it for Pearl. Well, good luck figuring out your shoulds versus your wants, everyone. Thanks for listening.
And we'll see you next time. Goodbye.